Dear disciple, go down the mountain. The master has arranged a marriage for you. You are a beautiful woman, so it's a bargain for you. The master ran away with the money collected. Lin Chen went down the mountain in grief and indignation to find his fiancée, but on the way he was dragged away by a beautiful woman to act as a fake boyfriend. What's more, the woman looks exactly like his unmarried wife. Keywords of the novel. Female CEOs Close Master No Pop-ups, Female CEOs Close Master TXT Complete Collection Download, Female CEOs Close Master Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1, Are You a Corrupt Person? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1, Are You a Corrupt Person? The scorching sun was scorching, and Lin Chen stood by the roadside, wiping the sweat off his forehead and angrily searching for the taxi. The unscrupulous master tricked him into a dark blade and treated him as a war doctor for 5 years. After finally retiring, he returned to the mountain to settle accounts with the old man, only to find out that he had left a letter and fled on his own. Good disciple, haven't you always wanted to know your background? You can go down the mountain now. When master found you, there was a jade pendant beside you. That jade pendant was very special and should have clues to your background. However, master was very poor at the time and owed people a favor. So he used the jade pendant as a betrothal token and arranged for a child marriage with the Heping Jiang Chu family. He received a dowry money, and then he worked hard to raise you. We have used the money, so this marriage must be acknowledged. However, the master has helped you check it out. Jia Shui, that girl, is a beautiful woman, the CEO of the company, both beautiful and capable. You have made a fortune, stinky kid. Let's live a good life. When my grandson is born, I will come to see you. Don't miss me too much. Thinking of Master Tianking's message, Lin Chen couldn't help but grit his teeth. The dowry money. I am a man, how do you want to accept someone's dowry money? Do you sell apprentices? Let me be a burden and become my son-in-law at the doorstep. From childhood to adulthood, I have been serving and taking care of you, doing laundry, cooking, making beds, and making blankets. You know how to drink all day long, but what do you mean by enduring hardships? I secretly trapped myself in a dark blade, and your salary card is also in your hands. You claim to help me save it and marry my wife. For 5 whole years, I haven't even seen a salary card like that. Excessive. Dad, when is it? Grandpa still said this. Hey, didn't I say that? I have a boyfriend. I can't afford to neglect my job. Alright, let's not talk anymore. A crisp and impatient female voice rang from behind Lin Chen. A young woman was on the phone crossing from Lin Chen's right side, preparing to cross the road. At the same time, a large truck rushed over from the left side at lightning speed. Lin Chen instinctively extended his right hand and grabbed the woman, pulling her back with a strong force. Who? The large truck rushed past in front of me. Lin Chen turned his head and shouted, You're not dying. Lin Chen was holding on to a young woman in her 20s and 40s, with a tall figure, delicate face, and long wine-red hair. She was wearing a camisole dress, fashionable and charming. Lin Chen's hand hastily pulled the suspender on the woman's shoulder, and with a fierce pull, the suspender skirt and underwear were pulled open in a huge curve. The entire front chest was exposed to the air, and Lin Chen's head on this side, white and pink, was clearly visible. Sorry. Lin Chen quickly apologized and suddenly withdrew his hand as if it had been stung by a wasp. The woman stood firm and her face turned pale. After all, it was too dangerous just now. She looked at Lin Chen's awkward gaze, instinctively lowered her head, then let out a scream, and quickly hugged her chest with both hands. Lin Chen felt quite embarrassed and casually advised, next time when crossing the road, be careful and don't make phone calls. It's not safe. After finishing speaking, Lin Chen turned his head and left, ready to take a taxi in a different place. However, he didn't go far, and there was a rapid sound of high heels hitting the ground behind him. Stop. Lin Chen stopped and turned to look at the woman following him. Is there anything wrong? The woman stood in front of Lin Chen and scrutinized him up and down, saying, from your accent, are you not a local? Lin Chen nodded and said, no, it's not. The woman withdrew her gaze and said, you're still looking careless. For the sake of saving me just now, do me a favor and I'll let you make a small fortune. Lin Chen frowned and said, what's up? The woman snorted, when I have a 2-hour boyfriend, accompany me to meet my parents. Lin Chen instinctively refused, no way. The woman snorted coldly, 10,000. Lin Chen was slightly surprised. This woman is quite wealthy, but he doesn't want to do this. The awkwardness in my heart has not yet passed. The woman didn't react to Lin Chen and directly increased the price. 50,000. Lin Chen frowned and explained, this is not about money, I have something else to do. The woman interrupted Lin Chen and said, you looked at my chest. Lin Chen suddenly felt embarrassed and said, I was just trying to save you. If I didn't pull you, you might have been hit. The woman said again, saving me is one thing, looking at my chest is another thing. If you don't agree, I'll shout out, you peek at my chest. Lin Chen was a bit dumbfounded and said, are you repaying kindness with kindness, and using porcelain to deceive people? The woman snorted coldly, you have to earn this money, you have to earn it if you don't. Lin Chen said speechlessly, okay, anyway, if you're not afraid of going through the gang, I don't care, but the money needs to be paid first. Anyway, this matter can't escape, so don't waste this money. I'm currently poor in my pocket, and my family's money, along with my salary for the past few years, has been taken away by the old man. The woman gave a cold smile, her gaze flickering with a hint of disdain and mockery. Card number. Lin Chen reported the card number, and the woman picked up her phone. In 1 minute, 50,000 yuan was credited to her account. Let's go. Lin Chen followed the woman forward and as she walked, she asked, what is your name? Lin Chen. The woman said cleanly, okay, your name is Lin Chen. You are a senior executive of an import and export trading company in the provincial capital of Linhai City. Your father owns 1/3 of the shares in the trading company, and my name is Gu Yueshi. I am 24 years old. In front of my family, you can call me Yeye. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. You don't even deserve to lift my sister's shoes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. You don't even deserve to lift my sister's shoes. I met you during a trip to Yunhai in June last year, and I have been in contact with you since then. I only recently confirmed my romantic relationship. This time, you happened to be on a business trip and came to see me. You will have something to do later, so you will have to leave soon. Gu Yueshi finished speaking cleanly about the background setting of Lin Chen's fake boyfriend. The general situation is like this. In front of my family, if you can speak less, you can speak less. If there is really no way, you can freely express yourself. As long as you fool around today, that's all. Lin Chen nodded and said, okay, where are we going now? Your house. Hospitals. Gu Yueshi said cleanly, my grandfather is hospitalized and he keeps nagging me to start dating and getting married soon. You can pretend to be my boyfriend and make him feel better. Still quite filial. Lin Chen muttered to himself, but remained silent. The two walked for a while and arrived at the parking lot. Gu Yueshi picked up the car, which was a red Porsche Macan. Gu Yueshi started the car and casually asked, are you working here? Lin Chen sat in the passenger seat, fastened his seatbelt, and casually replied, just came over, do something. Gu Yueshi asked after her, what can I do? Lin Chen calmly replied, my elders have arranged a marriage for me. Come and take a look. Gu Yueshi glanced sideways and said, look. Have you ever seen anyone? Lin Chen shook his head and said, I heard it's quite beautiful. Gu Yueshi snorted coldly, what era is it? It should be very easy to send a photo. Since I don't even show you the photo, I guess it must be very ugly. I'm afraid you'll regret it if you look at it, so I asked you to come over directly and cook cooked rice. Lin Chen blinked, shouldn't he be so pitted? It's just a matter of deceiving oneself for money, isn't it true that lifelong events are also deceiving oneself? On second thought, it doesn't matter whether you get married or not. They may not be willing to do so, just find a way to retrieve the jade pendant. Let's take a look. If it doesn't work, we'll have to run away. Gu Yueshi snorted, hee, man. The phone suddenly rang in the car, and Lin Chen glanced at the screen of the car's computer, which had the caller's name written on it. Snow. Gu Yueshi placed her slender index finger next to her lips in a hissing posture, then pressed the answer button on the steering wheel and said, Sister. A cold and pleasant female voice rang out, I heard Grandpa went to the hospital. Gu Yueshi replied, yes, I'm heading to the hospital. Okay, please send me your address later and I'll come over to visit later. Gu Yueshi replied, you, the CEO, are so busy all day that you don't even have time for dating. Aren't you going to hold a shareholder meeting today? If you're too busy, don't come over. My dad and his team are all over there. The woman's voice was gentle. It's okay, I'll take some time to go over after the meeting. Okay, I'll send you the address later. Okay, hang up first. Lin Chen casually asked, your sister is also single, no wonder your family is urging her. Gu Yueshi snorted coldly, my sister is like a phoenix in the sky. She is beautiful, has strong abilities, and is the CEO of the company at a young age. Which man deserves her? Lin Chen casually replied, there are always excellent men. Gu Yueshi gave Lin Chen a cold glance and said, anyway, it wouldn't be like you. Lin Chen laughed dumbfounded and said, what's wrong with me? I'm also excellent, okay. Just you. Gu Yueshi sneered, you're so confident. You're the only one who doesn't even deserve to lift my sister's shoes. Why don't you go find your fiancé AE who doesn't even dare to take a photo? Lin Chen was mocked and didn't get angry with a smile, but he was muttering in his heart. The master said that his fiancé AE was beautiful and also the CEO of the company, and he didn't know the truth. The car drove into a hospital in Pingjiang City, parked the car, arrived at the inpatient department, and entered a spacious single-room ward. On the hospital bed lay an elderly man with white hair, probably Gu Jianjun, the grandfather of Gu Yueshi. In front of the window was a married couple, dressed in gorgeous clothes, who were Gu Yueshi's parents, Gu Hongtao and Bai Qian. Grandpa. Gu Jianjun's pale face showed two smiles. Xiaoxi is here, this is. Gu Yueshi reached out and pulled Lin Chen's arm, introducing with a smile, Grandpa, this is my boyfriend Lin Chen. He happened to come to Pingjiang today, so I'll bring him to see you. Boyfriend. The three members of the Gu family's gaze fell on Lin Chen, filled with scrutiny and doubt. Faced with everyone's scrutiny, Lin Chen instinctively straightened his waist and back. Gu Jianjun looked around a few times and suddenly smiled, have you ever been a soldier? Lin Chen was slightly surprised and immediately smiled, saying, yes, you've just been discharged from the military. Old man, you really have a keen eye. Gu Jianjun laughed contentedly and said, hee, I have been in the army for my whole life. Those who have served in the army and those who have not, good soldiers and bad soldiers, can be seen at a glance. The young man is like a pine tree, calm as a mountain, and I believe he is not weak. Lin Chen suddenly realized that he had left the dark blade not long ago, and his military demeanor was quite obvious. Most people may not feel it, but Gu Jianjun had spent his entire life in the army, which was naturally noticeable. Veterans. Gu Hongtao's eyes showed a clear expression of disdain. Although he did not choose to join the military with his father, but instead chose to enter the business, he was very clear that if he was really excellent, he would definitely stay in the military for development. Lin Chen was discharged from the military at such a young age, which only shows one problem. He is very ordinary. Gu Jianjun asked, "What do you do after retiring from the military?" Lin Chen hesitated for a moment and replied, "I just came to Pingjiang and am planning to find a job here." Gu Hongtao's face turned ugly again. He didn't even have a job. Gu Yueshi is also in a hurry. Didn't she even create a family background for you? Why don't you play according to the routine? You're not involved in human affairs after receiving the money. Gu Yueshi was in a hurry, but she didn't dare to expose it. She turned her head and glared fiercely at Lin Chen, with a clear warning in her eyes. This glance naturally fell into the eyes of the Gu family, but their understanding of this glance was different. Gu Hongtao originally had a skeptical attitude towards Gu Yueshi's sudden appearance as a boyfriend, always feeling that it was too sudden and seemed fake, but now he is somewhat convinced. Perhaps it's because this kid's family has poor conditions and doesn't have much ability that his daughter is hiding and refusing to take him home. If it weren't for her grandfather's serious illness and persistent longing for her marriage this time, she probably wouldn't have brought her back. How can this kid be worthy of Xiaoxi? Gu Hongtao's face was icy cold. A poor boy with such poor conditions also wanted to marry Xiaoxi and enter the Gu family's door. Daydreaming. Gu Jianjun saw his son's expression and leaned against the hospital bed, laughing and saying, "Xiaoxi, don't despise him. As long as a man has the ability, temporary poverty is nothing. Grandpa, I also fought for nothing, which gave me the Gu family today. This person can't just want to enjoy happiness and not strive." Gu Yueshi had nothing to say, so she followed her grandfather's words and said, "I'm afraid you're not satisfied." Gu Jianjun smiled and said, "As long as he treats you well and looks like a man, Grandpa will be satisfied. When will you get married and have a child for Grandpa to see? Even if Grandpa dies, he will still be in peace." Gu Yueshi coquettishly said, "How could it be so fast? I'm only 24. Getting married, why don't we have to wait a few more years?" Gu Jianjun's eyes widened and he said, "It's already 24, you're still young. You." Before Gu Jianjun could finish his words, his face suddenly turned red, like a broken bellows. He was panting violently, feeling like he couldn't breathe. Doctor. End of this chapter. Where did you have a say in chapter 3? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Where did you have a say in chapter 3? The attending Dr. Jiao Feng arrived quickly and completed the examination. With a pale expression on his face, he greeted the Gu family to the entrance corridor. The old man's illness this time has affected the old wounds on his lungs, and he must undergo surgery to improve. However, this surgery takes a long time and places a great burden on his body. The old man's health is already poor, and there is a 90% chance that he will not be able to get off the operating table. Gu Hongtao anxiously asked, "What should we do now?" Jiao Feng smiled bitterly and said, "I am powerless. I can only prescribe some medicine to temporarily make the old gentleman feel better, but it is of no use to the condition." Lin Chen frowned beside him. There was an injury to his lungs, which he could see, but isn't it treatable? How can we be powerless? This doctor's medical skills are not good. Gu Hongtao looked disappointed and was about to speak when Jiao Feng's phone suddenly rang. Jiao Feng took out the phone and listened to it for a few words, with a surprised expression on his face. "Teacher, have you come to the City First Hospital?" Jiao Feng quickly hung up the phone and said happily, "Mr. Gu, don't worry. My teacher happened to be at the hospital. I'll go ask him to come and take a look. He must have a way." Gu Hongtao's eyes showed a hopeful expression. "Who is Dr. Jiao's teacher?" Jiao Feng replied, "Mr. Wen Yuan, one of the 4 famous doctors, is not his biological disciple. However, I have heard his lectures for a period of time and can barely be considered a student." Gu Hongtao's eyes lit up and he said, "Could you please Dr. Jiao? I will definitely thank you again when I come back. You guys wait first." Jiao Feng left, and shortly after, he came over with a renowned doctor with gray hair, Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan walked straight into the ward and treated Gu Jianjun. After a while, he looked up and said, "Prepare a set of silver needles." While waiting, Wen Yuan comforted Gu Jianjun with a smile and said, "Brother, don't worry, it's not a big problem. I'll give you a needle and you won't feel uncomfortable." Lin Chen breathed a sigh of relief beside him. "That's right, this is not a very difficult illness originally. Although it will take some time to completely cure it, relieving the current symptoms is just a matter of getting a few injections." He is truly a renowned doctor. The silver needle was quickly brought, and when Wen Yuan was ready, he picked it up and began to prick it. The first shot falls. Lin Chen blinked, his eyes a bit puzzled. Shouldn't he have pierced the divine and sealed the acupoint? How did he pierce the Tanzhong acupoint? The Tanzhong acupoint certainly has the effect of promoting qi flow and relieving asthma, but Mr. Gu's illness is different. If you prick the Tanzhong acupoint, the qi cannot come out, isn't it sealed inside? The second shot falls. Qihu acupoint. Seeing this, Lin Chen has understood Wen Yuan's idea of acupuncture and moxibustion. He subconsciously whispered to himself, "It's useless." All the people watched Wen Yuan's acupuncture and moxibustion attentively. Although Lin Chen said this quietly, everyone heard it clearly. Everyone's gaze fell on Lin Chen's face, different from each other. Since Lin Chen had already spoken, he continued, "If you prick like this, it will treat the symptoms but not the root cause. It will not only be useless, but also make the patient more uncomfortable." As soon as Lin Chen spoke, the faces of the people around him suddenly changed. Jiao Feng frowned and said, "Are you a doctor?" Lin Chen calmly replied, "I have studied with my master for a few years." Jiao Feng sneered, "Do you have a physician qualification certificate?" Lin Chen shook his head and said, "No." Jiao Feng said coldly, "You don't even have a physician qualification certificate, and you dare to speak up here. Do you know who this is? Teacher Wen Yuan, a nationally renowned top physician, needs your guidance." Lin Chen frowned and wanted to explain, but Gu Hongtao beside him had already glared at him with a cold and stern expression, staring at Gu Yueshi with displeasure. "Take care of your boyfriend and don't pretend to understand. What kind of occasion is this?" Gu Yueshi was scolded by her father, and her face turned red. She quickly grabbed Lin Chen and stared at him with fierce eyes. "You shut up." Lin Chen withdrew from his words and shrugged his shoulders, saying nothing more. "Well, you pay, you are the boss, and you are the final say." Lin Chen also interjected and offered advice because the old man had too favorable feelings for him, hoping that the old man would suffer less. "Since you don't appreciate it, let's not say it." Wen Yuan turned her head and continued to administer the needle. After several consecutive injections, 1 minute later, Gu Jianjun's intense breathing became noticeably quieter, and his tense body also relaxed. Wen Yuan nodded with satisfaction and smiled at Lin Chen, saying, "Young man, isn't that useful?" Lin Chen shook his head and persisted, "It's useless." Wen Yuan frowned before speaking, and Jiao Feng beside him sneered, "You're really a dead duck with a hard mouth." The old man's symptoms have noticeably improved. This is something everyone can see, but you can't see it. Are you blind? Wen Yuan frowned and said in a deep voice, "Medical skills can be high or low, and doctors have medical ethics. Young man, as a doctor, one must follow objective facts and not rely solely on subjective speculation. Otherwise, one can only become a quack doctor, causing harm to others and oneself." Lin Chen didn't refute, just smiled and said, "Why don't you try pulling out the silver needle?" Jiao Feng impatiently said, "Teacher, he doesn't even have the qualifications to be a doctor. What are you listening to him for? You think you're right, you're just messing around." Gu Hongtao was afraid that Wen Yuan would be angry, so he spoke coldly to drive people away. "Mr. Wen is here, there's no room for you to speak. You go out." You don't need to be here. Lin Chen didn't move and looked at Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan frowned and looked closely at Lin Chen. Lin Chen had a smile on his face, a calm expression, and his gaze was neither too low nor too high. After thinking for a moment, Wen Yuan turned his head and pulled out the silver needles one by one. Gu Jianjun lay quietly in bed, with a calm expression and steady breathing, as if nothing was amiss. After calming down, Gu Jianjun waved his hand and said to Gu Hongtao, "What are you driving people for? Even if he's wrong, he's also out of good intentions." Gu Jianjun's words suddenly stopped and he took a deep breath, coughing violently. This cough was even more intense than when the illness just broke out. Gu Jianjun's face turned purple, as if he was about to lose his breath and die the next second. The people in the room all had a big change in their faces, and their eyes were fixed on Wen Yuan's face. Wen Yuan's face was bewildered, his eyebrows furrowed, his eyes puzzled, and he murmured to himself, "Why? I've already used a needle." Lin Chen spoke up and said, "The 7-star needle technique you used is considered very good, but unfortunately, you are using a simplified version. The simplified version is missing 2 stitches, and the effectiveness is much worse." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Mr. Lin's Evidence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Mr. Lin's Evidence. When Yuan suddenly turned his head, his eyes filled with disbelief. This young man actually recognized at a glance that he was using the 7-star needle, and even realized that he was using a simplified version. When Yuan's words instinctively added a hint of advice. Even in the simplified version, I injected him with needles to help him breathe, but why did he do this? Lin Chen replied casually, "It's better to block than to expel. The acupoint where you injected is wrong. With these few injections, not only has your qi not been expelled, but it is also trapped inside. Once you pull out the silver needle, it will erupt even more violently. It's like a gourd in a water tank. If you press it with your hand, you can naturally push it to the bottom of the water, but once you release your hand, it will rise out of the water. That's the same principle." When Yuan looked incredulous and said, "Did I place the needle at the wrong acupoint?" Lin Chen glanced at Gu Jianjun, who was already gasping for breath, as if he was about to die. Without putting on airs or delaying, he stepped forward to the hospital bed and picked up the silver needle from the nearby tray. He directly said the answer. The first needle should not be the Tanzhong acupoint, but the Shenfeng acupoint. As Lin Chen spoke, the silver needle had already pierced like the wind, steadily piercing into the divine sealed acupoint, piercing 3 times without bias. When Yuan's eyes suddenly widened in shock. This silver needle is very soft, and Lin Chen surprisingly smoothly penetrated it all at once. This skill cannot be achieved by Wen Yuan. The second needle, Bulang acupoint. Lin Chen spoke in his mouth, but his hand kept moving, with needles falling like the wind. He brushed a row of silver needles on Gu Jianjun's body. Wen Yuan did not stop him, and even reached out to block Gu Hongtao and others who were trying to stop Lin Chen from taking action. His eyes were fixed on Lin Chen's injection, becoming brighter and brighter. The heavenly needle. When Yuan watched Lin Chen's injection technique for a while before suddenly exclaiming in surprise, his eyes wide open, and his face full of disbelief. Huitian acupuncture ranked the 3rd in the list of strange needles in the world, and it is one of the unique skills in acupuncture and moxibustion. The young man at present is so young that he can actually use Huitian acupuncture. Lin Chen turned back and pressed down on the 2 acupoints on Gu Jianjun's body. Gu Jianjun's tense body suddenly relaxed, and he let out a long breath in his throat. His purple and black face quickly turned light red. "Slow down." Lin Chensong let go of his hand and helped Gu Jianjun lie in bed. He turned his head to look at Wen Yuan and smiled slightly, "You have a good eye. I really used a rebound needle." The people in the room all had strange expressions. This tone, if Wen Yuan said to Lin Chen, it seems like there is no problem at all, but Lin Chen said to Wen Yuan, why does it feel strange? Gu Hongtao and others did not understand medical skills or the 7-star needle, but just now the old man looked terrifying as if he was about to take his breath away. Now, his breathing was stable, and his face gradually returned to normal. Everyone could see that the old man's symptoms had improved. Wen Yuan, one of the 4 famous doctors, had a shocked expression when he saw a ghost, which could also explain many issues. Unexpectedly, Wen Yuan made a mistake in diagnosis and treatment, and this mistake was corrected by Lin Chen. He also gave Wen Yuan a solid lesson. Gu Hongtao's gaze was shocked, and his face was mixed with sadness and joy. Xi's daughter suddenly brought back her boyfriend with great medical skills, who actually saved the old man. I'm worried that with today's situation, if I want to drive him away from my daughter's side, the old man may not be the first to agree. Gu Yueshi was stunned and looked incredulous. How could a man caught on the street be so powerful? This 50,000 yuan is so valuable. Wen Yuan's gaze towards Lin Chen was already filled with an undisguised burning sensation. Wen Yuan arched his hand and politely asked, how do you call me, sir? Lin Chen. Wen Yuan asked after him, I don't know who Mr. Lin learned from. Lin Chen replied, I only know my master's surname is Xue. Wen Yuan thought for a moment, but didn't expect a famous doctor surnamed Xue. He simply stopped thinking and said gratefully, fortunately, Mr. Lin was here today, which prevented one from making a big mistake. One is extremely grateful. Lin Chen smiled and said, you're welcome. Wen Yuan asked again. Although acupuncture and moxibustion has alleviated the patient's symptoms, it cannot be completely eradicated. Can Mr. Lin do something about it? Lin Chen nodded. Acupuncture and moxibustion plus medicine can heal as long as you take good care of yourself. Wen Yuan's eyes lit up and he thought for a moment. He asked Jiao Feng to bring a pen and paper, and took the initiative to write down the prescription in his heart. He then respectfully handed the prescription to Lin Chen with both hands. This is the prescription I prescribed. Please verify it, Mr. Lin. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Do you want to pretend to be with me? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Do you want to pretend to be with me? Lin Chen took the prescription, carefully examined it, and smiled. The prescription I prescribed is similar to yours, except for an additional 15 grams of ginger seeds. Mujiangzi. Wen Yuan murmured and fell into thought, her eyes also feeling a bit dazed. The prescription involves whether Gu Jianjun can recover. Gu Hongtao and others dare not disturb him and keep quiet, but their expressions become increasingly eerie. Unexpectedly, Wen Yuan is asking Lin Chen for a prescription. Lin Chen's medical skills are even more powerful than Wen Yuan's. Gu Yueshi stared at Lin Chen with bright eyes, as if she had discovered a new continent. What kind of immortal did you pick up and go home? On the other hand, Wen Yuan's expression became increasingly excited as he pondered, and his eyes became brighter. He finally slapped his thigh. So it's like this, adding a piece of wood ginger seed can produce a wonderful reaction with the medicine inside. The medicinal properties of this medicine can be improved by at least 30%. Amazing, amazing. Wen Yuan regained his senses and looked at Lin Chen again with a respectful gaze. Mr. Lin has excellent medical skills, and Wen feels inferior. I don't know if it's possible to add Mr. Lin's contact information. I will express my gratitude to Mr. Lin another day and also ask for his advice. Lin Chen was slightly surprised and said, you are a famous doctor. Can you ask me for advice? Wen Yuan's face was calm and sincere, saying, there is no end to medical skills, and those who reach it are teachers. Lin Chen saw Wen Yuan's sincere attitude and clearly said the truth. He took out his phone and exchanged contact information with Wen Yuan. Mr. Lin, I'll take a step forward and contact you later. Okay. Wen Yuan turned around and went out, while Jiao Feng left with an awkward expression on his face, leaving behind a sentence before leaving. I am powerless to deal with Mr. Lin's illness. You should follow Mr. Lin's instructions. In the room, the Gu family looked at Lin Chen and the atmosphere was strange for a moment. Gu Yueshi was the first to speak. Lin Chen, did you just say that my grandfather's illness can be cured? Lin Chen took up his pen, added wood ginger to the prescription Wen Yuan had just written, and handed it to Gu Yueshi. 3 bowls of water are boiled into 1 bowl of water, and 1 pair of medicine is taken for 1 day, 3 times, for 1 month, and acupuncture and moxibustion is applied. Lin Chen suddenly realizes that he is a fake boyfriend. 2 hours later, he and the Gu family will have nothing to do with each other. That's acupuncture and moxibustion. But after all that said, Lin Chen just insisted on going on. It's better to cooperate with acupuncture and moxibustion. Of course, without acupuncture and moxibustion, if you stick to taking medicine, your symptoms will be greatly improved, and you won't have a relapse like today. Everyone in the Gu family was pleasantly surprised. Just now, the attending Dr. Jiao Feng said there was nothing to do, but the matter was solved in the blink of an eye. If there is no recurrence, doesn't that mean it's almost cured? Although Lin Chen doesn't even have a physician qualification certificate, even Wen Yuan has to respect those who seek advice. What he says should be true and valid, right? Just. With acupuncture and moxibustion. Gu Yueshi frowned secretly. Even Wen Yuan could not use acupuncture and moxibustion, let alone other doctors. Take medicine and acupuncture and moxibustion for 1 month, doesn't that mean that after today, I have to continue to pretend my relationship with this fake lover? It's not over yet. Gu Jianjun just made such a fuss, losing half of his life and lying down weakly. Gu Yueshi's mother, Bai Qian, stayed in the room to take care of her, while the others withdrew from the ward. On the corridor, Gu Hongtao stared at Lin Chen and said, Lin Chen, can Grandpa Xiaoxi's illness be completely cured? Lin Chen nodded. Acupuncture and moxibustion with medicine, no problem. Gu Yueshi glared at Lin Chen, her gaze inexplicable. You guy, shouldn't you have done it intentionally? Under the pretext of acupuncture and moxibustion, don't you want to pretend to me? Dream it, you. Lin Chen noticed Gu Yueshi's look and added with a smile, it's okay not to have acupuncture and moxibustion, but to take medicine for 1 month, and I will not relapse in the future. I'm busy with work and things, and the time is not necessarily appropriate. Gu Yueshi breathed a sigh of relief and said, you are wise. Is this girl also worthy of you? The toad wants to eat swan meat. Humph. After thinking for a moment, Gu Hongtao took out a bank card from his pocket and handed it to Lin Chen. Today you saved Xiaoxi's grandpa, and our family are very grateful to you. In order to make the old man no longer suffer from this kind of crime, you have taken great pains to take charge of the old man's treatment during this period of time. Acupuncture and moxibustion should not be left behind. It is better to recover completely without leaving the root of the disease. There are 500,000 yuan in it. Take it as a compensation for delaying your time. 500000, a wealthy family. Lin Chen didn't rush to reach out, but looked at Gu Yueshi beside him. Gu Yueshi was stunned for a moment, as if she didn't expect her father to come out like this. She didn't care about 500,000 yuan, but when her father did this, wouldn't she and Lin Chen continue to pretend? Gu Yueshi exclaimed discontentedly, Dad. However, Gu Hongtao understood the meaning of Gu Yueshi's dissatisfied shout, thinking that she thought Lin Chen was her boyfriend and that Lin Chen was helping her grandfather treat his illness. He shouldn't give money in such an outsider way. He frowned and resolutely inserted his bank card into Lin Chen's hand. The password is 6/8. Xiaoxi, I know you and Lin Chen are lovers, but your relationship is one thing, and Lin Chen's treatment of your grandfather is another thing. I don't want to confuse them, nor do I want this matter to affect the direction of your future relationship. Lin Chen's eyes flashed with a strange smile. Gu Hongtao despised himself for having no background and being a poor boy, so he didn't even care about him. After saving the old man, he chose to use money to solve this favor, so that when he hit the mandarin duck, there would still be this favor that was difficult to handle. Now that I have collected the money myself, I will not delay or owe this matter, and there will be no human involvement in the future. I will not be accused of crossing the river or demolishing the bridge. Since uncle said that, then I'll accept it. Lin Chen accepted his bank card and glanced at Gu Yueshi, who was feeling angry next to him. He added with a smile, in the future, when we are with Yaya, we also need to buy our own house. I'll save this money for now. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Beauty, are you lying on me? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Beauty, are you lying on me? Gu Yueshi's face turned red and she glared fiercely at Lin Chen. Shut up. Gu Hongtao's face was cold for 2 minutes again. Ignoring this, he asked directly, we will stick to taking medicine. How often should acupuncture and moxibustion be used? Once every 3 days is enough, and the frequency can be reduced afterwards. Gu Hongtao nodded and said, okay, in those 3 days, Xiaoxi will contact you. The subtext of Gu Hongtao's words was to expel guests, and Lin Chen readily agreed, okay, then I'll take a step first. Gu Yueshi blinked and said, Dad, I'll see him off. Okay. Gu Yueshi and Lin Chen left the inpatient department. Gu Yueshi stopped and stared at Lin Chen, asking fiercely, did you mean it? Lin Chen said with a smile, acupuncture and moxibustion. Gu Yueshi snorted, you saved my grandfather. I am very grateful to you, but don't have any thoughts about me. I don't like you. Gu Yueshi spoke frankly, but Lin Chen was not angry either. Instead, he found this girl quite interesting. A bit of a young lady's arrogance, but also straightforward and not annoying. Lin Chen handed Gu Yueshi the bank card. Acupuncture and moxibustion is getting better and better, not acupuncture and moxibustion. Otherwise, you can take the money back, find a reason, and then I will disappear, okay? Gu Yueshi looked surprised and said, 500,000, are you willing to accept it? Lin Chen smiled and said, didn't I already earn you 50,000? Let's consider treatment as a gift service. Gu Yueshi hesitated for a moment and didn't answer the card. Instead, she took out her phone and said, you can take the money. Just help my grandfather treat his illness, and add a contact information. Okay. After adding the contact information, Lin Chen looked around and waved his hand, saying, all right, come back and contact me. I'll go to the restroom and hold it for half a day. Lazy cows and lazy horses have a lot of feces and urine. Gu Yueshi snorted and was about to return upstairs when the phone suddenly rang. Jia Xue. Ah, I forgot to send you the location just now. Parking lot. I'm downstairs from the inpatient department. I'll wait for you. Okay. Quickly, a tall and beautiful woman walked over from the direction of the parking lot. She wore a blue collarless short-sleeved suit dress and black high heels, with a delicate face that resembled Gu Yueshi's appearance by 7 or 8 points. Her eyes were cold and her aloofness was full of charm. Gu Yueshi stepped forward and took the beautiful woman's arm, looking at her. It's so beautiful. You can wear professional attire like a goddess. A shallow smile appeared on the beautiful woman's face and she said, what are you praising me for? Aren't we all similar in appearance? Others say we're twins. Gu Yueshi smiled and said, I do look similar, but my temperament is much worse than yours. The beautiful woman took a step and said, how's Grandpa doing? Gu Yueshi quickly grabbed the woman and said, Grandpa is okay, don't worry. I'll let you know for now. I hired a fake boyfriend to come over today, hee hee. Gu Yueshi tugged at the woman and said, you're really being mischievous, but by chance, you've done a good thing. Otherwise, Grandpa Gu's illness wouldn't have recovered so easily. Gu Gu Yueshi walked towards the dormitory building holding the woman's arm and responded with a smile, "My luck has always been good." At the same time, Lin Chen walked out of the bathroom from the other side and turned his head to see Gu Yueshi walking into the inpatient department, holding a woman's arm. "Oh, that woman is really tall and has really long legs. Are all the beauties really clustered together?" Lin Chen said, roast in his heart, turned and left the hospital, checked the navigation, found that there was a direct bus, and walked to the bus stop. Anyway, it's not urgent, saving a little is a bit. The bus also has air conditioning. The bus rolled slowly and arrived at the address left by the master, which was the fiancée's residential area. 69, Longting Road. Listening to Rain Studio. Lin Chen walked to the entrance of the community and was stopped by a salute from the security guard. "High-end villa community, please do not enter unless requested." Lin Chen was not angry either. He took out his phone and dialed the number left by his master, but the call was answered but no one answered. Lin Chen suddenly felt a bit dumbfounded. What should I do? After hesitating for a moment, Lin Chen decided to wait. Anyway, everyone has come. Lin Chen sent a text message to that phone number. "Hello, I am Lin Chen. On behalf of my master, I have come to visit and am currently waiting at the gate of the community." After sending the message, Lin Chen squatted on the steps next to the gate without any image and lit a cigarette. Halfway through smoking, a white BMW X7 slid over from the street and stopped in front of Lin Chen, waiting for the railing to rise. The driver was a beautiful woman in a blue collarless short-sleeved suit with a delicate face. Her gaze swept over Lin Chen, who was squatting next to him smoking, and her gaze was cold. "Gu Yueshi." Lin Chen widened his eyes and stood up with a surprised expression, saying, "Isn't that right? Are you following me? You're not finished hitting porcelain, are you blaming me? Do we know each other?" The beautiful woman frowned lightly, her gaze fixed on Lin Chen, both bewildered and guarded. "Do you pretend to know each other? Are you going too far?" Lin Chen looked at the familiar face and took 2 steps closer. He bent down and lowered his voice slightly, saying, "You're reasonable, even if I looked at your chest before." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Rogue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Rogue. That was also an unintentional move, and it was also to save you. If you don't appreciate it, it's okay. Why are you still clinging to me? I told you before, I have a fiancée. Rogue. Lin Chen had not finished speaking yet, but the beautiful woman's face suddenly changed. She coldly dropped 2 words and then stepped on the gas pedal. The car rushed out from beside Lin Chen and rushed into the community from under the raised railing. Lin Chen looked surprised. "Rogue. She called me a hooligan." Looking at the white rear of the BMW X7, Lin Chen suddenly realized. Gu Yueshi drives a Porsche Macan, while this woman drives a BMW X7. Gu Yueshi is wearing a camisole dress, and this woman is wearing a professional suit. Gu Yueshi is a mischievous ancient spirit, with a proud and delicate temperament but not indifferent. This woman has a full aura, a cold gaze, like an iceberg. Gu Yueshi's hair is wine red, and this woman's hair is black. I'll go, I really got the wrong person. When I say something to an unfamiliar woman I don't know and look at her breasts, even a woman would get angry and angry. No wonder she scolds me as a hooligan. I really deserve it. Just this woman and Gu Yueshi look too similar, right? Lin Chen and Gu Yueshi parted ways, and suddenly saw her reappear in front of him, so his mind naturally didn't react for a moment. This oolong is too embarrassing. Lin Chen felt extremely embarrassed in his heart, and there was a hint of shyness on his face. He even felt that the security guard nearby looked at him with contempt in their eyes. Forget it, let's go, let's go. What a shame. Just as Lin Chen was about to run away, his phone rang, which was the one he had missed before. Hello, is that Xiaolin? I'm Chu Bosun. I was just working on the vegetable garden I planted and didn't bring my phone. Are you still at the door? After answering the phone, the security guard made a simple identity registration and allowed Lin Chen to enter, but his gaze remained strange. Lin Chen entered the community and found Building 16 in Villa A area. As soon as he walked to the door, he saw a spirited old man standing at the door, warmly smiling at him. Xiaolin, come in quickly. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Bosun's voice was loud and sincere, and he directly pulled Lin Chen towards the inside, relaxing Lin Chen's somewhat uneasy heart. Not bad. Without the aloofness and arrogance of wealthy families, otherwise Lin Chen would really have turned around and run away. Hello Grandpa Chu. Chu Bosun interrupted, Grandpa, you're about to marry Xiaoxue. You'll be a family from now on, don't be so open-minded. Light Snow, is this your fiancé's nickname? Chu Bosun looked at Lin Chen's expression and was stunned for a moment. You don't know Xiaoxue's name, your master probably didn't tell you anything, did he? Lin Chen awkwardly replied, he just left a phone number and didn't say anything else. Chu Bosun laughed and cursed, this guy is really unreliable. Xiaoxue, she is my granddaughter and also your fiancée. Her full name is Chu Jiaxue. Lin Chen didn't know how to answer, after all, he had no idea about the relationship between his master and Chu Bosun, or the origin of this engagement. At the moment, he could only nod and remain silent. Entering the room, Chu Bosun had his servant brew tea for Lin Chen and started chatting. Chu Bosun knew Lin Chen very well, and in his vague words, he seemed to even know about his involvement in the Dark Blade. He was very enthusiastic towards Lin Chen, and his gaze at him was like that of a grandson, very friendly. Lin Chen felt helpless in his heart. Master Tianking had sold his information completely, but the Chu family's information was not disclosed at all, putting him in a passive position. While chatting, footsteps sounded at the staircase. Chu Bosun turned around and smiled, Xiaoxue, it's coming down. Come and see Lin Chen. Lin Chen instinctively followed his head and then saw Chu Jiaxue standing on the stairs wearing loose T-shirts and shorts, their eyes touching each other. It's her. Surprisingly, it's the beautiful woman I just met at the entrance of the community who looks very similar to Gu Yueshi. She is actually his fiancée Chu Jiaxue. Why is it so coincidental? Before we actually met, we left an extremely bad image in the other person's heart at the same time. Chu Jiaxue also saw Lin Chen clearly and instinctively blurted out, it's you. Lin Chen was extremely embarrassed, but he could only resist the embarrassment and say, Miss Chu, hello. Humph. Chu Jiaxue's eyes were a bit cold and disgusted. With a cold snort, she turned her head and went upstairs. Chu Bosun's face showed a look of surprise and confusion. He turned to look at Lin Chen and said, Xiao Lin. Do you know each other? Lin Chen awkwardly replied, I just met at the entrance of the community and had a misunderstanding. I offended Miss Chu. Chu Bosun suddenly said, there was a misunderstanding. Just explain it clearly. We are all young people, so there is nothing difficult to say. Lin Chen thought for a moment and said, how about I apologize to Miss Chu? Wrong is wrong, Lin Chen is willing to apologize, after all, the cause of the misunderstanding lies in himself. Chu Bosun smiled and said, you sit down for a while, and I'll go up and take a look. Young man, he's very angry. Just give him a few words of advice. Chu Bosun went upstairs, while Lin Chen sat on the sofa, feeling embarrassed. As soon as such a thing happened, my impression of Chu Jiaxue in her heart was definitely negative. I'm afraid this engagement will be ruined, right? In Lin Chen's wild speculation, Chu Bosun and Chu Jiaxue went downstairs together. Chu Jiaxue regained her cold appearance when she first met, sat beside Chu Bosun, listening to him speak, but she remained silent and didn't look at Lin Chen. Chu Bosun apologetically said, Xiaoxue has been independent and aloof since childhood. Please take care of her, Xiaolin. Lin Chen quickly shook his hand and said, No, 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 this is actually my fault. Miss Chu, I was the one who acted rashly before. I'm really sorry. Chu Jiaxue looked unwilling to speak, but under Chu Bosun's gaze, she only let out a cold nod, as if accepting Lin Chen's apology. Chu Bosun smiled and said, Just resolve the misunderstanding. Xiaolin, your marriage to Xiaoxue was already arranged by your master and me. Xiaoxue has been waiting for you for a few years. Now that you have finally returned from the military and both of you are not young, don't waste any more time. Tomorrow, you can go and get your marriage certificate. End of this chapter. Are you still not satisfied with me in chapter 8? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Are you still not satisfied with me in chapter 8? Obtaining certification. Lin Chen's eyes suddenly widened in disbelief. I haven't been there for an hour since I entered the door, so I need to obtain a certificate. It's too exaggerated. Even if it's a fiancé AE arranged by elders, don't you need to cultivate feelings and go through the process? Lin Chen instinctively looked at Chu Jiaxue, pondering whether Chu Jiaxue had a bad impression of her. She would definitely speak out against her. However, to Lin Chen's surprise, although Chu Jiaxue's lips clearly curled, she was clearly very dissatisfied, but she did not speak out against it. Is this agreed? Xiaolin, do you have any objections? Chu Bosun's question brought Lin Chen back to his senses and he awkwardly smiled. Miss Chu and I just met today. Could it be a bit rushed? Chu Bosun said nonchalantly, What's so rushed? You went to the army before and stayed there for 5 years, but Xiaoxue waited for you for 5 years. Now that you are both quite old, don't waste any more time. Emotional matters can be slowly cultivated. You are a good child, and I don't think you will make Xiaoxue sad. Waiting for 5 years. Lin Chen was still wanting to speak, but Chu Jiaxue next to him suddenly spoke up, Grandpa, I want to have a chat with Lin Chen alone. Chu Bosun was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, That's right. You young people do need to communicate well, but Xiaoxue. Chu Bosun didn't finish his words, he just stared at Chu Jiaxue with a deep meaning in his eyes. Chu Jiaxue nodded confidently and said, Grandpa, don't worry. Since I promised you, I won't act recklessly. Chu Bosun just smiled and said, Okay, you guys go talk. Chu Jiaxue glanced at Lin Chen and said, Let's go out and take a look. Lin Chen actually wanted to chat with Chu Jiaxue and readily agreed, okay. The two of them walked out the door and continued along the path until they reached an artificial lake. Chu Jiaxue stopped, turned around, and stared at Lin Chen with a cold gaze. I don't want to marry you. Lin Chen hesitated for a moment, then nodded naturally and said, I know. Perhaps it was Lin Chenping's peaceful reaction that lowered Chu Jiaxue's hostility in her heart. Her tone slowed down slightly and she said, Can you accept it? Lin Chen spread his hands, smiled calmly, and said calmly, Which woman doesn't want her love to be grand? Even if it's not grand, at least it should be mutually pleasing, rather than being forced together. The twisted melon may quench thirst, but it may not necessarily be sweet. Chu Jiaxue's mouth curled uncontrollably, and she was amused by Lin Chen's last witty remark. Chu Jiaxue thought for a moment and said, I don't understand why my grandfather insisted on me marrying you. I don't want to get married now, but I don't want to disappoint my grandfather. Lin Chen felt a bit confused for a moment and said, What do you mean? Do you want me to take the initiative to refuse this engagement? Chu Jiaxue shook her head and said, No, it's not. Lin Chen really didn't understand, so he said frankly, Miss Chu, I admit that you are very beautiful. You are more beautiful than I expected. I must have made a lot of money by marrying you, but when it comes to finding a wife, it's not necessarily necessary to find a more beautiful one. The most important thing is for everyone to be willing and get along well, right? Now it's Chu Joshua's turn to get confused. What do you mean by that? Are you still dissatisfied with me? Lin Chen then said, I have no intention of forcing Miss Chu to marry me against her heart. When I came to the Chu family, I actually hoped to retrieve the jade pendant that my master gave to Mr. Chu before. Chu Joshua widened her eyes and said, Jade pendant. Lin Chen tentatively asked, Yes, my master said it's an engagement token. Does Miss Chu know about this? Chu Joshua nodded and said, I know, that jade pendant. My grandfather gave it to me. Lin Chen was overjoyed and said, Miss Chu, since you don't want to marry me, why don't you give me that jade pendant and I'll take it and leave? Chu Joshua was stunned and immediately felt inexplicably embarrassed. What does the joyful expression on his face mean? Don't want to marry yourself. Just want to retrieve that jade pendant. I have no attraction to him at all. Lin Chen looked at Chu Joshua's anger and quickly added, I know that when the master gave the old man the jade pendant, he took a sum of money from your Chu family. This is what we owe. I'll admit it, so you can tell me the number. I'll pay you back when I earn enough money, okay? Money. Chu Joshua suddenly became inexplicably angry in her heart. Am I angry because of money? Chu Joshua silently bit her back teeth and spoke coldly, No, you have to marry me. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Are you afraid that I might mislead you? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Are you afraid that I might mislead you? Miss Chu, didn't you say you didn't want to get married, let alone marry me? Lin Chen is quite confused. Did he make a mistake in his understanding ability? Or did you hear it wrong just now? Chu Joshua felt a sense of shame and anger in her heart. After all, in her perception, the man in front of her was a despicable rascal who peeked at a woman's breasts. He doesn't want to marry himself, but now he has to take the initiative to ask to marry him. My parents passed away early, and my grandfather pulled me up. I don't want my grandfather to be disappointed, let alone sad, so I will marry you. Formally. Lin Chen finally understood and opened his eyes wide, saying, Are you saying fake marriage? Chu Joshua nodded lightly and said, Yes, there is no real name. Lin Chen instinctively objected, That's not possible. I still want to marry a wife. If this evidence is false, I'm already a married man. Isn't that useless? Miss Chu, it's your responsibility to be filial. I don't seem to have an obligation to play any pretend husband and wife with you, do I? Chu Joshua spoke coldly, Didn't you want a jade pendant? In 3 months, I will divorce you and give you the jade pendant. Lin Chen's eyes lit up and he said, 3 months. Yes. Lin Chen asked again, Do you want any money? Chu Joshua gritted her teeth and said, No money. Lin Chen muttered, 3 months is not a long time. Just because I acted like this with you, I immediately became a divorced man. When people ask about girlfriends in the future, they may think I'm a scumbag or some kind of domestic violence guy. Chu Joshua unconsciously clenched her hand into a fist, feeling increasingly angry and wanting to punch Lin Chen in the face. Divorced man. Am I not a divorced woman? I am not afraid of a pure beauty, and you are a notorious hooligan. What else are you afraid of damaging your reputation? Chu Joshua said coldly, I'll give you an extra 1 million. Is that enough? Lin Chen waved his hand and said, Forget the money, but can I ask why it's 3 months? A hint of sadness flashed in Chu Joshua's eyes, and she immediately said with a cold face, 3 months is about the time when 2 people can get to know each other. When we tell Grandpa that our personalities don't match and it's difficult for everyone to be together, Grandpa will naturally not stop us from getting divorced. After all, we are already married and have tried our best. It makes sense. Are you unmarried? The old man will definitely say that you haven't tried before, how can you know if it's not possible? After getting married for a few months, our engagement has been fulfilled, and our promises have been fulfilled. If we can't get along, what can we do? At that time, the old man really had no reason to force the two of them to be together again. Lin Chen pondered for a moment, and it didn't take long for 3 months. As long as he received the jade pendant and found clues about his own background, he could leave. Lin Chen looked up and said, "Since it's a fake couple, besides pretending to be a couple at home, you can't interfere with my other activities." Chu Joshua's eyes flashed with a hint of disgust. She was a scumbag, but a dog can't change its habit of eating shit. She couldn't help it for 3 months. "I want to go out and hang out with other women, right?" Chu Joshua said coldly, "All you need to do is cooperate with me in acting in front of my grandfather. I won't interfere with anything else. It's none of my business whether you go to a bar or flirt with girls. Don't expose yourself in front of my grandfather." Lin Chen breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, "I have no objections. It's a deal." Chu Joshua also breathed a sigh of relief and nodded, "I will make a contract later, and you can sign it then." Lin Chen smiled and said, "Contract? You're afraid that I might mislead you later. Alright, you can handle it and I'll sign it." Chu Joshua pursed her lips and did not deny it. She was indeed worried. Firstly, she was worried that Lin Chen would play tricks and refuse to divorce in 3 months. Secondly, she was worried that when she got divorced, Lin Chen would speak up and ask for various things, such as a large sum of money, company shares, etc. After all, in Chu Joshua's heart, Lin Chen was just a rogue and villain. What could such a person not do? Go back. Lin Chen saw Chu Joshua's disgust and vigilance towards him in her eyes, feeling helpless. What's going on? Not to mention that marriage has become fake, I have also become a proper villain in Chu Joshua's eyes. Thinking of Gu Yueshi's face that resembled Chu Joshua's, Lin Chen couldn't help but ask, "Miss Chu?" Chu Joshua turned around and said, "In front of my grandfather in the future, you can call me Joshua." Lin Chen nodded and said, "As for acting, it's natural to have a complete set. It's all about getting married and being called Miss Chu. Isn't that a clear indication to the old man that their relationship is like a stranger?" "Okay, Joshua." Chu Joshua glared at Lin Chen and said, "I mean in front of my grandfather, that's why you call me that." Lin Chen spread his hands and said, "People have a habit of calling themselves Miss Chu. They call her Shun Ko, but sometimes they don't get over it all at once. It's easy to get used to calling her wrong in front of the old man. It's just a name. If you care about it, then this play won't be able to be performed. Does this guy hit the snake and follow the stick, using the opportunity to flirt with himself and play hooliganism?" Chu Joshua stared at Lin Chen twice, but ultimately did not speak up to refute, because what Lin Chen said was indeed reasonable. To pretend to be a married couple, I can't even bear a name. How can I pretend? Okay, you can call it, but don't have any dirty ideas. Dirty. Lin Chen smiled bitterly, can't this misunderstanding be resolved? Do hooligans have to carry the blame on themselves all the time? No, I have to ask myself. Joshua, let me ask you something. Do you have a sister or sister? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Which newlyweds sleep in separate rooms? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Which newlyweds sleep in separate rooms? Sister or younger sister? Chu Joshua's gaze suddenly turned cold for 2 minutes, and her inner contempt instantly widened. Seeing that you can't marry me, you want to hit on my sister. Your heart is really dirty. Chu Joshua answered coldly, "No, my parents are just my daughter." No. Gu Yueshi and Chu Joshua look so alike, just like twins. Is it possible that Chu Joshua's sisters who lives outside doesn't even know about Chu Joshua, or is it really just a coincidence? Lin Chen felt strange in his heart and explained, "Joshua, I think you misunderstood me. I said that to you at the entrance of the community because I met a woman before. Before Lin Chen could finish explaining his words, Chu Jiaxue impatiently interrupted coldly, Lin Chen, our relationship is just a 3-month contract, fake marriage. After 3 months, you will be you and I will be me. I cannot fall in love with you, let alone fall in love with you. We are destined to be strangers, so you don't need to explain your relationship with other women to me. I'm not interested in listening, let alone wanting to hear. Lin Chen frowned and had no intention of further explanation in his heart. Okay, hooligans are just hooligans. You are the proud daughter of heaven, I am not worthy of you. You can think whatever you like. Just get the jade pendant. Just consider yourself here to pay off the debt. This jade pendant is a betrothal token handed over by the master to the old man of Chu. He also took a large amount of money from the Chu family and owed a lot of favor. Therefore, if he wants to retrieve the jade pendant now, the Chu family must be willing to do so. Lin Chen cannot use any means, even if he suffers some injustice, it is still appropriate. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a great ingratitude? If I really use my means to forcibly retrieve the jade pendant and hurt the hearts of the Chu family, the master will definitely break my leg. Okay. Chu Jiaxue didn't say much anymore, turned around and returned home, with a slender figure. Because she was wearing a T-shirt and shorts, her large white legs looked even more slender. Lin Chen looked at Chu Jiaxue's legs and couldn't help but mutter, Gu Yueshi is like this, the woman holding onto Gu Yueshi's arm in the hospital is like this, and Chu Jiaxue in front of him is also like this. TSK, there are so many beautiful women with big white legs, but it seems that they have nothing to do with him. Returning to the room, Chu Bosun sat on the sofa, his gaze scanning the faces of both of them, looking expectantly, how was the conversation going? Chu Jiaxue sat next to Chu Bosun, took his arm, and chuckled lightly, it's pretty good. Chu Bosun was immediately very happy and said, so, will we receive the certificate tomorrow? Chu Jiaxue nodded briskly and said, okay. Chu Bosun stared at Lin Chen and said, Xiao Lin, do you have any objections? Lin Chen smiled and said, Jiaxue is so beautiful. I can't be too happy to marry Jiaxue. Chu Bosun affectionately glanced at Chu Jiaxue and said, Xiaoxue's parents passed away early, and I'm getting old. I don't know which day my eyes will wake up. I don't care about anything else, the only thing I care about is Xiaoxue. If I also leave, she doesn't even have anyone to take care of. Now that everything is okay, with Xiaolin taking care of her, I can completely rest assured and have no more worries. Chu Jiaxue's eyes turned slightly red and she said, Grandpa, what are you talking nonsense about? You must live a long life of 100 years. Chu Bosun smiled and said, yeah, I still have to watch you get married and have children. Xiaolin, I'm just such a granddaughter. You're a capable person, and the old man doesn't have any other requirements. I just hope that no matter what storms you encounter in the future, you can protect Xiaoxue. How strange is this statement, like a last word from a hospital bed. After performing the entire set, Lin Chen naturally smiled and agreed, I'm married, and Jiaxue is my wife. I will naturally protect her. Chu Bosun laughed heartily and said, okay, with your words, I can rest assured. Xiao Lin, let's have a good dinner together. Okay. Chu Bosun may have really let go of a big stone in his heart. He didn't drink much at night, and people got drunk, but it was evident that he was really happy, with an old and contented demeanor. Lin Chen was sleeping in the guest room, preparing to rest when Chu Jiaxue knocked on the door and entered, holding 2 printed contracts in her hand. Sign it. Lin Chen took over the contract and glanced roughly at it, which was basically what the two of them were discussing during the day. Lin Chen didn't have any further ado, just signed and printed on one of the copies. Chu Jiaxue frowned and handed Lin Chen another copy, this one is yours. Lin Chen took it and casually tore it off. Chu Jiaxue's face changed and she said, what are you doing? Lin Chen smiled and said, just keep your portion, I don't need it. Chu Jiaxue was right when she thought about it. Whoever raised the question would provide evidence. If Lin Chen wanted to rely on money and marriage, even if he had this contract, he would not bring it out because it was unfavorable to him. Chu Jiaxue snorted coldly and then turned to leave. Lin Chen stopped her and said, "Jiaxue." Chu Jiaxue stopped and turned to stare at Lin Chen, his face cold and his eyes wary. Lin Chen smiled bitterly and said, "I just want to remind you that after obtaining the certificate tomorrow, we will be a legal couple. If you have this attitude towards me every day, it will definitely not last. Also, I can sleep in the guest room today, but after obtaining the certificate, it's impossible for me to sleep in the guest room all the time, right?" Chu Jiaxue's face suddenly changed. Yes, she had already forgotten this before. Where do newlyweds sleep in separate rooms? Do you want to sleep in the same room with this stinky thug for 3 months? End of this chapter.